Welcome back to Slang of Ages podcast on YouTube. This is episode number 2, season 4. And this episode will talk about Neil Young's Trans album from 1982. Actually, the album was supposed to be Island in the Sun by Neil Young in 1982 with him and Crazy Horse. And this was to be his first Geffen Records album. He submitted Islands to the Sun to Geffen and they didn't like it. So he went back in and decided to do Trans. Trans is an album where he really made for his son. I believe it was son's name is Zeke, who suffers from some ailments, which makes it difficult for him to communicate. So Trans was a method that Neil Young used to help communicate with his son and people like his son. And Neil Young decided to employ synclaviers, synthesizers, and a vocoder to emulate the communication of a computer. He also brought in some players he hadn't used in a while, such as Niels Lofgren on rhythm guitar, Bruce Palmer, who was the original bass player from the album, from the band Buffalo Springfield, Joe Lala, who was a conga player for Crosby, Stills Nash and Young, and Ben Keith, who handled pedal steel and steel guitar. He created these songs. They were really based, like I mentioned, on computer program communication with a vocoder replacing Neil Young's vocal and Neil Lofgren's harmony. And they were fascinating songs. Along the way, he also decided to incorporate 3 songs from the Islands in the Sun album as well. So those are much more conventional. And I feel that if he had not done that, the album would have been much more accessible, much more consistent if he had used just the computer type songs. There was drum machines on his album, which are a little unusual for Neil Young, but it was a bold effort. Young said that he also wanted to release a video for every song on the album because that gave more context to each of the songs. But when he went to Geffen to ask for the money, Geffen said no. Geffen Records said, no, we're not going to do that. We're not going to spend the money on videos. We will give you a production budget. We will give you a promotion budget, but no videos. So Young always felt that the story of Trans wasn't fully told because of the songs from Islands in the Sun and the lack of videos for each of the songs. There was one song on the album, Mr. Soul, which was a Buffalo Springfield redo where it had drum machines, but it had Neil Young slashing Les Paul guitar parts on it. And there's some really good rock songs. Amazingly enough, 40 years later, the album sounds better than it did when it was released. Maybe because the concept of communication and the distances between people is more prevalent now we're living in the digital age. Young proved again that he was ahead of his time. In any case, this is one of my favorite Neil Young albums. He did 5 for Geffen. Of the 5, this one, Landing on Water, and I would say Life are probably my favorite he did for Geffen. None of those were really big hits, so this one did chart, I think, to number 29 on the album chart. So if you don't have it, seek it out. And I encourage you to listen to the podcast while I go into song by song description of each of the songs from Trans. And I will see you very soon. Thanks for listening.